The Nexus Arena stretched across 3 kilometers of polished obsidian, its crystalline dome reaching toward the twin suns of Kepler 442b. Representatives from 47 species filled the massive amphitheater, their chittering, growling, and harmonious voices creating a cacophony that would have driven most humans mad. But Hana Kim stood in the center of it all, her slight frame dwarfed by the towering alien delegates, and felt perfectly calm. "This is humanity's champion?" The voice belonged to Commander Veloth of the Vorthani Empire, his forearms gesturing dismissively at Hana's modest height of 1.65 meters. His exoskeleton gleamed like polished steel, and his mandibles clicked in what passed for laughter among his species. "I have seen human entertainment programs with more intimidating performers." Ripples of amusement spread through the assembled aliens. The Krillian delegate, resembling a massive crystalline spider, tapped its legs in rhythmic mockery. The gas-based Etherians pulsed with colors that clearly conveyed derision even across species barriers. From the viewing platform reserved for human observers, Daeho Park clenched his fists, watching his former protege endure the humiliation with stoic silence. Hana adjusted her simple black combat suit, noting how every other champion wore elaborate armor or relied on natural carapaces that could deflect plasma bolts. Her equipment consisted of basic protective gear and a standard-issue weapon harness. Compared to the 2-meter-tall Gorthak, Veloth's chosen champion, she looked like a child playing dress-up. "The Human Confederation has made their selection," announced the Arbiter, a being of pure energy that served as neutral overseer of the grand tournament. "As per ancient law, no substitutions may be made once a champion has entered the arena grounds. Ancient law protects even the suicidal," Gorthak rumbled, his voice carrying the weight of a landslide. The Vorthani champion's hide could stop small arms fire, and his claws had torn through reinforced steel in previous demonstrations. "I will make this quick, small one. Your species need not suffer long." Kyungmi Lee, monitoring from the human technical station, whispered urgently into her communicator. "Hana, their preliminary scans show Gorthak's bone density is 4 times human standard. His reaction time test put him in the 99th percentile for all documented species." But Hana wasn't listening to the technical readouts. She was watching Gorthak's stance, noting the slight favor he showed his left side, cataloging the barely perceptible hesitation when he shifted weight to his rear legs. Most importantly, she observed the pattern of his breathing and the telltale signs of overconfidence that made him broadcast his intentions. "The tournament format remains unchanged," the Arbiter continued. "Single elimination combat across 5 rounds. Victory conditions include death, incapacitation, or surrender. The winning species gains preferred status in galactic trade negotiations for the next solar cycle." Hana finally spoke, her voice carrying clearly across the arena despite its softness. "I understand the conditions. When do we begin?" The laughter that erupted from the alien delegates was deafening. Even some humans in the observation deck shook their heads in dismay. The youngest daughter of a soul shopkeeper, barely 26 standard years old, speaking as if she had any chance against beings that had evolved on death worlds. 3 standard days for preparation and preliminary rounds," the Arbiter replied. "First elimination round begins at dawn on the 4th day." As the gathering dispersed, Hana remained motionless in the arena center, her dark eyes tracking every champion as they departed. She memorized gates, noted favored weapons, and cataloged the subtle social hierarchies displayed in their interactions. While others saw her solitary figure as pathetic, she was already constructing the foundation of her strategy. Daeho approached from the observation deck, his weathered face creased with concern. "Hana, you know I supported your selection, but seeing them all together like this, you're having doubts," she finished for him, turning to face her old commanding officer. "Good, doubt keeps us sharp. Did you notice Gorthak's breathing pattern when he laughed?" "His breathing?" Daeho blinked. "I was more concerned with his claws." Hana smiled for the first time since entering the arena. "The claws are obvious. Everyone can see those. But rhythm tells you everything about an opponent's conditioning, their emotional state, even their cultural background." Gorthak breathes like someone who has never faced a real challenge. As they walked toward the human quarters, the alien mockery continued to echo across the arena. But Hana Kim was no longer listening to their derision. She was already 3 moves ahead, planning for a victory that none of them could imagine. The human delegation quarters buzzed with heated discussion as the tactical team reviewed champion profiles. Holo displays showed detailed analyses of each alien competitor, their physiological advantages stark against human baselines. Deho stood before the assembled advisors, his expression grim as he fielded questions about their champion selection. "With respect, Commander Park," said Dr. Wan Shik, the delegation's xenobiologist, "we had stronger candidates. Jiwoo tested in the top 5% for human physical conditioning. Even Nam Ri showed superior reflexes in the simulation runs." Hana entered the briefing room quietly, noting how conversations paused as she approached. The weight of their doubt pressed against her shoulders, but she had carried heavier burdens. During the Martian Rebellion, she had planned operations where entire colonies depended on her tactical decisions. This was just another puzzle to solve. "The selection has been made," Daeho replied firmly. "Captain Kim has my full confidence." "Captain?" Dr. Wanshik raised an eyebrow. "I thought she was discharged after the incident at Olympus Station." The room fell silent. Hana's military service had ended not in glory, but in a quiet resignation following a classified operation that went wrong. The official records remained sealed, but rumors suggested she had lost an entire squad due to faulty intelligence. Some whispered she had frozen under pressure. "My service record is irrelevant to current circumstances," Hana said calmly, activating one of the holographic displays. "What matters is understanding our opposition. Dr. Wanshik, your physiological analyses are excellent, but they miss critical behavioral patterns." She manipulated the display to show recorded footage of Gorthek's previous arena appearances. "Observe his pre-combat rituals. The chest beating, the territorial marking, the deliberate intimidation displays. These aren't random behaviors." "Obviously," Dr. Wanshik scoffed. "He's establishing dominance through threat display. Basic predator psychology." "Exactly," Hana agreed. "And that's his weakness. Gorthek has never faced an opponent who didn't respond to intimidation. His entire fighting style assumes his enemy will be psychologically compromised before combat even begins." Kyungmi looked up from her technical station, where she had been monitoring alien communications. "Hana, you should see this. The betting markets have you at 3,000 to 1 odds. Some species are wagering their entire trade allocations against you." "Good," Hana replied, surprising everyone. "Overconfidence makes opponents predictable." The meeting was interrupted by the arrival of Ambassador Chen, Earth's senior diplomatic representative. His usually composed demeanor showed cracks of strain as he addressed the group. "The Vorthani have requested a private audience. They want to discuss terms for humanity's surrender before the tournament begins." Murmurs of outrage filled the room, but Hana remained silent, studying the tactical implications. "What are they offering? Continued trade at current levels, no territorial restrictions on human expansion, and a guarantee that Earth won't be subjected to punitive measures after your inevitable defeat," Ambassador Chen replied. "It's actually more generous than I expected. Because they're certain they can't lose," Hana said, which tells us something important about their psychology. They're not just confident, they're so certain of victory that they're willing to negotiate from a position of assumed strength. Daeho nodded slowly, beginning to understand. "You're planning to use their certainty against them." "Every species in this tournament has evolved under different pressures," Hana continued, walking to the window that overlooked the arena. "The Vorthani developed on a high-gravity world with massive predators. Their survival strategy emphasized overwhelming physical dominance. But humans evolved as persistence hunters on a world that rewarded adaptation and cooperation." Dr. Wanshik frowned. "That's an interesting anthropological perspective, but in practical terms, Gorthek can literally tear you apart with his bare hands." "Only if he can catch me," Hana replied. "And only if I fight the battle he expects." She turned back to the group, her expression serious but determined. "I need complete technical specifications on the arena environment. Gravity fields, atmospheric composition, available equipment, even the mineral composition of the fighting surface. Kyungmi, can you also access historical records of tournament matches?" "Already on it," her friend replied, fingers flying across her interface. "I'm also monitoring alien communication channels for any strategic intelligence." As the briefing continued, Hana felt the familiar calm that came with a developing strategy. She had been underestimated before during the academy, throughout her military service, and especially after Olympus Station. But every time, those who dismissed her had eventually learned the same lesson. Physical strength was only one dimension of combat. Outside their quarters, alien champions conducted their own preparations. Massive training apparatus shook the ground as beings threw enormous weights and sparred with weapons that could level buildings. The displays of raw power were meant to intimidate, and they succeeded in impressing the watching crowds. But Hana wasn't watching the demonstrations. She was studying the spaces between movements, the rhythms of recovery, and the psychological tells that revealed more about an opponent than any strength measurement ever could. "Captain," Deho said quietly, as the others dispersed to their tasks. "What really happened at Olympus Station?" Hana considered the question carefully. "I trusted intelligence reports instead of my own observations. I let others define the battlefield instead of creating my own advantages. I won't make those mistakes again." The 2-day preparation period would be crucial. While her opponents focused on maintaining their physical edge, Hana would be doing something none of them expected. She would be learning to fight a war they didn't even know had begun. The arena's training facilities operated around the clock, accommodating the diverse biological needs of 47 species. While most champions focused on physical conditioning, Hana spent her time in the observation galleries, watching her future opponents with the intensity of a predator studying prey. Day 2 of preparation phase. Kyungmi reported through her earpiece as Hana observed the Krillian champion, demolishing practice targets with crystalline projectiles. "I've compiled detailed behavioral profiles on 32 of the 46 other champions." Hana adjusted her position to get a better view of the Krillian's reload pattern. "What about environmental controls for the arena?" "Interesting discovery there," Kyungmi replied. "The arena's gravity can be adjusted in sections, atmospheric composition can be modified, and there are modular terrain features that can be activated during combat. But here's the key detail. Champions can request environmental modifications if they can demonstrate religious or cultural necessity." "Cultural necessity," Hana repeated thoughtfully. "That's exploitable. What about equipment regulations?" "Standard weapons and defensive gear only, but the definition of standard varies by species. Gorthak's claws count as natural weapons. The Etherian champion can phase through solid matter as a species ability, and the Drakari representative breathes plasma as a normal biological function." Hana nodded, watching as Gorthak entered the training area below. The Vorthani champion moved with casual arrogance, other aliens quickly vacating training stations as he approached. His warm-up routine involved bending steel bars and punching through reinforced barriers that would stop human military vehicles. "He's showing off," Deho observed, joining Hana at the observation window. "Classic intimidation tactics." "More than that," Hana replied. "He's revealing his entire combat philosophy. Watch his footwork during the strength demonstrations." They observed as Gorthak performed his routine, his massive frame moving with surprising grace through offensive patterns. But Hana saw what others missed: the slight pause between combinations, the way he telegraphed direction changes, and most importantly, the complete absence of defensive thinking in his movement patterns. "He's never fought a mobile opponent," she realized aloud. "Every movement assumes his enemy will either flee or engage directly. There's no adaptation for lateral tactics or unconventional approaches." Dr. Wanshik approached their position, tablet in hand. "Captain, I've completed the physiological analysis you requested. Gorthak's species has incredible strength and resilience, but there are some interesting vulnerabilities." Hana turned her attention to the data. "Show me." "Their visual processing is optimized for tracking large, obvious threats. They have difficulty with rapid, small-scale movements. Additionally, their inner ear structure suggests they're susceptible to disorientation if their balance is disrupted." "Useful," Hana acknowledged. "What about pain response?" "Extremely high tolerance, but that works against them in some ways. They don't receive early warning signals that would make other species adjust their tactics. They'll fight through injuries that should force retreat." Hana filed this information carefully. A strong pain tolerance could be an advantage for Gorthak, but it also meant he might not recognize when he was being systematically damaged until it was too late. "Captain Kim," a new voice interrupted. Hana turned to see Ambassador Tesh of the Altarian Collective, one of the few species shorter than humans. "Might I have a word?" They stepped aside from the main observation area. The Altarians were known for their neutrality and analytical approach to galactic politics. Ambassador Tesh's presence suggested more than casual interest. My government has been following humanity's participation with great interest, Tesh began. Your selection as champion has been unexpected. Disappointing, you mean, Hana replied directly. On the contrary, the Altarian Collective has observed that the most dangerous opponents are often those who appear least threatening. We wonder if humanity might be employing deeper strategy than apparent. Hana considered her response carefully. What would your government's interest be in such a strategy? The current galactic power structure favors physical dominance. The Vorthani, Drakari, and Krillian triumvirate has controlled major trade routes for 3 centuries. A shift in that dynamic could benefit many smaller species. The implication was clear. Other species were watching for any sign that the established order might be challenged. Hana realized she wasn't just fighting for humanity's prestige, but potentially representing a coalition of underestimated civilizations. I appreciate your confidence, Hana said diplomatically, though I should mention that Earth's strategy is simply to compete honorably within the established rules. Ambassador Tesh's species equivalent of a smile was subtle but unmistakable. Of course, though I should mention that Altarian cultural practices require meditation periods during combat. If such a need arose, arena modifications to create appropriate sanctuary spaces would be considered reasonable accommodation. After the ambassador departed, Hana returned to her observations with renewed focus. The political implications added layers to her strategy, but the core challenge remained unchanged. Find a way to defeat opponents with overwhelming physical advantages. Kyung-mi, I need you to research something specific, she said into her communicator. Traditional human combat sports, particularly those that emphasize technique over strength. Focus on grappling arts and anything involving leverage principles. On it. But Hana, are you really planning to grapple with Gorthak? He outweighs you by 200 kilograms. I'm not planning to grapple with him, Hana replied, watching as the Vorthani champion continued his intimidating display. I'm planning to make him grapple with himself. As the second day of preparation drew to a close, most champions concluded their training with impressive demonstrations of power. Gorthak's final exercise involved shattering a practice dummy that had been designed to withstand military-grade explosives. But Hana was no longer watching his strength. She was timing his recovery periods, measuring his breathing patterns under exertion, and cataloging every micro-expression that revealed his psychological state. Tomorrow the preliminary rounds would begin, and she would start the process of systematically dismantling everything the galaxy thought they knew about combat effectiveness. The real training was just beginning. The preliminary rounds eliminated half the field in brutal efficiency. Hana watched from the competitor staging area as champions who had seemed invincible during training were systematically destroyed by even more powerful opponents. The Nexus Arena's crystalline walls amplified every impact, every roar of triumph, and every sound of defeat. First elimination match, the Arbiter announced, its energy form pulsing with neutral authority. Champion Hana Kim of the Human Confederation versus Champion Vextar of the Selenian Hegemony. The crowd's reaction was immediate and dismissive. Betting displays updated in real time, showing odds that had moved beyond mathematical expression. Some species weren't even bothering to wager, considering the outcome predetermined. Vextar emerged from the opposing staging area like a living nightmare. The Selenian champion stood 3 meters tall, his chitinous exoskeleton gleaming with bioluminescent threat displays. Multiple arms ended in razor-sharp appendages, and his compound eyes tracked Hana's every movement with predatory focus. Little human, Vexitar's translator rendered his clicking speech into standard galactic. Your species chose poorly. I will make your death swift. Hana stepped onto the arena floor, her simple equipment kit a stark contrast to Vextar's natural weapons. The arena configuration for this match was basic. Flat obsidian surface, standard gravity, breathable atmosphere for both species. No complications, no advantages. Exactly what everyone expected for a quick elimination. Arena sealed, the Arbiter announced. Combat begins on my signal. Hana didn't respond to Vextar's threats. Instead, she moved to the center of the arena space, her stance loose and non-threatening. To the observing aliens, she appeared frozen with fear. But Kyung-mi, monitoring from the human technical station, recognized the posture from their academy training. Hana was entering her analytical state. Begin. Vextar charged immediately, his multiple limbs creating a whirlwind of slashing attacks. The assault would have overwhelmed any opponent who tried to match it directly. But Hana wasn't there when the strikes arrived. She had moved left, then back, then left again, each step timed to the rhythm of Vextar's attack pattern. The Selenians' compound eyes, designed to track fast-moving prey in low light, lost focus when their target moved in precisely calculated micro-steps rather than dramatic evasions. "Stand still, coward," Vextar shrieked, launching into another flurry of attacks, but Hana had already catalogued his combat rhythm during their brief exchange. Selenians were ambush predators who relied on overwhelming initial assaults. When that failed, they became increasingly desperate and sloppy. She continued her pattern of minimal movements, each one perfectly timed to avoid contact, while remaining just close enough to frustrate her opponent. After 90 seconds of frantic attacking, Vextar paused to reassess, his bioluminescent displays flickering with confusion and growing anger. That pause was exactly what Hana had been waiting for. She moved forward for the first time since combat began, closing distance with 2 quick steps that brought her inside Vextar's optimal striking range. His multiple arms swung inward to crush her, but she had already dropped low, using his own limbs as temporary cover while she struck upward with a standard military combat knife. The blade found the joint between Vextar's primary and secondary exoskeleton segments, a vulnerability that Dr. Wanshik's analysis had identified, but which seemed impossible to exploit against such a fast opponent. Unless, of course, that opponent was completely focused on offensive combinations and had never learned to protect his structural weak points. Vextar's shriek of pain echoed through the arena as his left primary limb went limp. Hana was already moving again, flowing around his wounded side where his defensive capability was now compromised. A second precise strike severed motor control to his rear legs. The Selenian champion crashed to the arena floor, his remaining limbs flailing uselessly as Hana stepped clear of his reach. The paralytic effect of her strikes would wear off in several hours, but the match was effectively over. Victory to champion Kim, the arbiter announced into stunned silence. The arena's reaction was immediate and chaotic. Several alien delegates were already arguing with officials, claiming the match had been decided by luck rather than skill. But the technical recordings were clear. Every movement Hana had made was precisely calculated, every strike placed with surgical accuracy. "Impossible," Commander Veloth snarled from the Vorthani viewing section. The human avoided combat entirely, then struck without honor. "She fought within established rules," the arbiter replied with neutral authority. Victory conditions have been met through incapacitation of the opposing champion. As Hana departed the arena floor, she noticed the changed atmosphere in the competitor staging area. Champions who had previously ignored her now watched with new attention. The casual dismissal was gone, replaced by the wariness that came from witnessing the unexpected. "Brilliant work," Deho said quietly as she returned to the human technical station. "Though you've just painted a target on yourself. Every remaining champion will be studying that match." "Good," Hana replied, accepting a hydration pack from Kyungmi. "Let them study. They'll be looking for the wrong patterns." Dr. Wanshik approached with his tablet, his expression transformed from skepticism to intense curiosity. "Captain, your strike placement was perfect. But how did you identify those specific neural junction points under combat conditions?" "Vextar telegraphed his entire physical structure through his attack patterns," Hana explained. "Selenians evolved to hunt in packs, which means their individual combat style emphasizes overwhelming offense, while relying on teammates to cover vulnerabilities. He literally showed me where he was weakest by demonstrating how he was strongest." The elimination bracket updated on arena displays, showing Hana's advancement to the second round. Her next opponent would be determined by the evening's remaining matches. But several possibilities were already clear. Each represented a different type of challenge that would require adapted tactics. "Betting markets are in chaos," Kyungmi reported, monitoring galactic financial networks. "Some species are trying to withdraw their wagers, but tournament regulations forbid changes once competition begins." Hana studied the updated bracket, calculating possible paths to the final rounds. Mathematical probability suggested she would face either the Drakari champion in round 3, or advance far enough to challenge Gorthak directly. Both scenarios require different strategic approaches. I need detailed analysis of every remaining champion, she told her team. Combat patterns, species psychology, technical capabilities, everything. The element of surprise only works once. As the day's remaining matches played out with predictable brutality, Hana remained in the observation gallery, watching each contest with the same intensity she had brought to studying Vextar. Every champion who advanced would eventually face her, and she intended to understand each of them better than they understood themselves. The galaxy had dismissed humanity's champion as a laughable mistake. Now they were beginning to realize they might have underestimated more than just her individual capabilities. They were starting to question whether they understood human combat philosophy at all. But Hana knew the real test was still coming. The preliminary rounds had eliminated the weakest opponents, leaving only the species that had dominated galactic politics through strength and intimidation. Her next victory would need to be even more convincing, and her opponents would no longer underestimate her preparation. The war was just beginning, and she was exactly where she needed to be. The tournament's final bracket had been decided through 3 days of systematically brutal elimination. Only 8 champions remained, representing the galaxy's most dominant military powers. Hana had advanced through each round with victories that grew increasingly impossible to dismiss as luck. But her path to this moment had been carefully calculated from the very beginning. Championship match, the arbiter announced to the packed arena. Champion Hana Kim of the Human Confederation versus Champion Gorthak of the Vorthani Empire. The crowd's reaction was electric with anticipation and disbelief. No one had expected the human to survive the preliminary rounds, much less reach the finals. Betting markets had collapsed entirely as species struggled to comprehend odds that defied all established combat theory. Gorthak emerged from his staging area like a force of nature, his massive frame casting shadows across the arena floor. The Vorthani champion had dominated his path to the finals, with displays of raw power that left opponents as broken wreckage. His claws gleamed with fresh sharpening, and his hide bore ceremonial war paint that marked him as undefeated in 43 personal combats. Small human. Gorthak's voice rumbled through the arena's amplification system. You have entertained these weaklings with tricks and cowardice. But now you face true strength. Now you face me. Hana stepped onto the arena floor for the final time, her equipment unchanged from the tournament's first day. Simple protective gear, standard weapons, nothing that suggested she belonged on the same battlefield as a being who could tear through reinforced steel. But her posture carried a confidence that had grown with each impossible victory. Arena configuration set for championship protocols, the arbiter announced. Terrain features active, environmental controls available upon request. Extended combat duration authorized. The arena transformed around them. The flat obsidian surface rose into a complex landscape of platforms, barriers, and elevated positions. Multiple levels created opportunities for 3-dimensional combat, while varied terrain offered advantages to different fighting styles. This was the environment where champions had proven their dominance for centuries. I know what you are, Gorthak continued, circling the central platform where Hana waited. You study weaknesses like a scavenger picking at bones. But I have no weaknesses, small one. I am perfection shaped by countless generations of survival. You're right about one thing, Hana replied, her voice carrying clearly despite its softness. I do study weaknesses, but you're wrong about not having any. Commander Veloth leaned forward in the Vorthani viewing section, his forearms tense with anticipation. End this charade, Gorthak. Show these lesser species what true power accomplishes. The human technical station buzzed with desperate activity as Kyung-mi coordinated final tactical support. Every scan, every analysis, every observation from the past week had been distilled into a comprehensive understanding of their opponent. But theoretical knowledge meant nothing without perfect execution. Begin. Gorthak launched himself forward with explosive force, his massive frame moving faster than most species could track. The platform shook under his impact, and his claws extended to their full length as he sought to end the match with a single overwhelming assault. But Hana wasn't on the platform when he arrived. She had moved to the arena's vertical surfaces, using equipment anchor points to establish position on the arena wall. The movement was fluid and practiced, suggesting she had planned for exactly this scenario. From her elevated position, she observed Gorthak's recovery pattern as he realized his target had vanished. "Face me," he roared, spinning to locate her new position. "Fight with honor." "Honor is surviving to protect what matters," Hana replied, releasing her anchor to drop behind him on the main platform. "You want me to fight your kind of battle because it's the only kind you know how to win." She landed in a controlled roll that brought her within striking distance of Gorthak's rear legs. But instead of attacking, she activated a small device that had been disguised as standard equipment, a high-frequency sound pulse, tuned specifically to Vorthani inner ear structure, disrupted his balance systems just as Dr. Wanshik's analysis had predicted. Gorthak stumbled, his massive frame betraying him as he struggled to compensate for the disorientation. In that moment of vulnerability, Hana struck with a precision that had been refined through 7 previous tournament victories. Not at his armored hide, but at the small neural cluster behind his left secondary joint that controlled his primary weapon systems. The strike was perfectly placed and completely ineffective. Gorthak's natural armor was too thick, his pain tolerance too high, and his combat instincts too refined for such a simple attack to succeed. He backhanded Hana with casual force, sending her flying across the platform to crash against a barrier wall. "Did you think your insect tricks would work against me?" Gorthak advanced with predatory confidence. "I am not some weak prey species to be confused by toys and misdirection." Hana struggled to her feet. Her protective gear cracked from the impact. Blood ran from a cut above her left eye, and her right arm hung at an awkward angle that suggested significant damage. To every observer, the match appeared to be reaching its inevitable conclusion. But as Gorthak closed for the finishing blow, Hana smiled. "You're absolutely right," she said, activating her communicator with her undamaged hand. "Kyungmi, religious accommodation request. Human cultural practice requires meditation space during combat." The arena's environmental controls responded immediately, creating a small atmospheric pocket around Hana that registered as sacred space under tournament regulations. Gorthak's charge was halted by automated systems that prevented interference with legitimate cultural practices. "What trickery is this?" Commander Veloth demanded. "No trickery," the Arbiter replied. "Human cultural accommodation has been approved and verified. Champion Kim has 90 seconds for required meditation." But Hana wasn't meditating. She was activating equipment that had been disguised as religious artifacts, assembling a weapon configuration that had never been tested under tournament conditions, but which represented the culmination of human engineering adaptation. 90 seconds, she called to Gorthak, who paced furiously at the edge of the protected space. "That's all I need to show you what human strength really looks like." The assembled weapon was unlike anything the galaxy had seen. A fusion of traditional human combat principles with technology, adapted from captured alien equipment, not designed to overpower Gorthak's natural advantages, but to turn those advantages against him in ways that no Vorthani had ever experienced. "Time expired," the Arbiter announced. "Combat resumes." Gorthak charged again, but this time Hana was ready to fight the battle she had been planning all along. Not a contest of strength against strength, but a demonstration of what happened when human adaptability met alien overconfidence. The real fight was about to begin. The weapon Hana assembled from her disguised components defied every expectation the galaxy held about human technology. Where alien engineering emphasized overwhelming force, human design had focused on adaptation and efficiency. The device in her hands was both familiar and revolutionary, a magnetic acceleration system that could turn any metallic debris into a precisely targeted projectile. Gorthak's charge carried him directly into the path of Hana's first shot. A piece of arena debris accelerated to hypersonic velocity. The projectile struck his armored hide with enough force to stagger him, but not enough to penetrate. However, penetration had never been the objective. The impact point began to glow with residual heat, marking the exact center of Gorthak's chest. Before he could recover, Hana fired again and again, each shot striking the same location with mechanical precision. The Vorthani champion's natural armor could absorb individual impacts, but no defense could indefinitely withstand concentrated force applied to a single point. "Impossible," Commander Veloth breathed from the viewing section. "Human technology cannot achieve such accuracy under combat conditions." But Dr. Wanshik, monitoring from the human technical station, understood exactly what he was witnessing. "She's not relying on the weapon's accuracy," he explained to the gathered observers. She's using Gorthak's own predictable movement patterns to control where the impacts occur. Indeed, every charge, every defensive posture, every aggressive advance that Gorthak made followed patterns that Hana had studied for days. His confidence in his natural abilities made him incapable of adapting to tactics he had never encountered. Each movement brought him exactly where Hana needed him to be for the next calculated strike. The repeated impacts began to show effect. Hairline fractures appeared in Gorthak's chest armor, spreading outward from the impact point like a spiderweb of structural failure. The Vorthani champion's breathing became labored as the stress fractures affected his ability to expand his chest cavity. "You fight without honor," Gorthak snarled, launching another charge that Hana sidestepped with minimal effort. "I fight to win," she replied, placing her next shot with surgical precision. "Honor is a luxury for those strong enough to choose their battles." The crowd's reaction shifted as they realized what they were witnessing. This wasn't luck or trickery. It was systematic dismantling of a seemingly superior opponent through superior tactical thinking. Hana had never tried to match Gorthak's strength because she had never needed to. She had simply made his strength irrelevant. The human is using applied physics principles we've never seen in arena combat, Ambassador Tesh observed from the Altarian viewing section. Force multiplication through precision rather than raw power output. Gorthak's movements were becoming increasingly desperate as his chest armor continued to deteriorate. The fractures had spread across his entire torso, and each breath brought obvious pain despite his species' legendary tolerance. For the first time in his combat career, he was facing an opponent he couldn't simply overpower. "Stand still and face me properly," he roared, abandoning tactical thinking entirely in favor of pure aggression. But Hana had been waiting for exactly this moment. Gorthak's tactical discipline finally broke under the stress of facing something he couldn't understand, reverting to the pure predatory instincts that had served his species for millennia. Those instincts made him completely predictable to someone who had studied them with scientific precision. She fired one final shot, this time aimed not at his damaged chest armor, but at the structural weak point in his left knee that had been revealed during his training sessions. The projectile struck with perfect timing, just as Gorthak shifted his weight for another charge, and the combination of impact force and body mass resulted in catastrophic joint failure. The Vorthani champion crashed to the arena floor with enough force to shake the entire complex. His left leg bent at an impossible angle, and his damaged chest armor finally cracked completely, exposing the vulnerable tissue beneath. He struggled to rise, but his injured leg couldn't support his massive weight. "Victory to Champion Kim," the arbiter announced into absolute silence. For several seconds, the arena remained frozen in disbelief. Then chaos erupted as 46 species tried to process what they had just witnessed. The foundation of galactic military doctrine, that physical superiority determined combat effectiveness, had been shattered by a human who weighed less than one of Gorthak's limbs. "Protest!" Commander Veloth shouted, all forearms gesturing wildly. "The human used illegal technology. This victory is invalid. All equipment was inspected and approved under tournament regulations," the arbiter replied with mechanical precision. "Human cultural and religious artifacts were verified as legitimate. No violations have occurred." Hana approached the fallen Gorthak, who watched her with a mixture of pain and bewildered respect. "How?" he asked simply. "You fought the battle you wanted to fight," she replied, offering him medical assistance that he accepted with surprising grace. "I fought the battle I needed to fight. The difference is that I studied your strengths and found ways to make them irrelevant, while you assumed your strengths were enough." Dr. Wanshik was already analyzing the implications from the human technical station. "The galaxy's entire military balance just shifted," he reported to Earth Command. "If human tactical methodology can neutralize overwhelming physical advantages, then every species' strategic calculations need to be reconsidered." Ambassador Chen, monitoring diplomatic channels, added his own observations. 17 species have already requested formal meetings to discuss enhanced cooperation with humanity. The Vorthani triumvirate's political influence just collapsed in real time. But Hana wasn't thinking about galactic politics as she helped stabilize Gorthak's injuries. She was remembering Olympus Station, where her tactical planning had failed because she had trusted others' assessments instead of her own observations. This time, she had trusted only what she could verify personally, and the difference had saved more than just her own life. The Human Confederation is hereby granted preferred status in all galactic trade negotiations, the Arbiter announced. Tournament protocols have been fulfilled. As the arena began to empty, species representatives clustering around the human delegation with unprecedented interest, Hana remained on the combat floor. Kyungmi approached with medical supplies, but her friend was grinning with uncontainable pride. "So," Kyungmi said as she tended to Hana's injuries, "what's it like being the most dangerous human in the galaxy?" Hana considered the question seriously. "Exactly the same as being underestimated," she replied. "Except now everyone knows better." Daeho joined them, his weathered face creased with an emotion somewhere between pride and relief. "Captain, Earth Command wants a full tactical report on how you achieved this victory." "Tell them it wasn't about being stronger," Hana said, watching as Gorthak was carried away by Vorthani medical teams, who treated him with the respect due a fallen champion. "It was about being more adaptable. That's always been humanity's greatest strength. We learn, we adapt, and we find ways to win battles that everyone else thinks are impossible." The Nexus Arena's twin suns were setting as the last of the spectators departed, but the implications of the day's events would ripple across the galaxy for generations. Humanity had announced itself not as another species seeking to join the existing power structure, but as a civilization that could fundamentally change the rules by which that power was measured. And it had all begun with a single human who understood that being underestimated was the greatest tactical advantage of all.